Good evening and welcome to Olde Tyme Taunton. I'm your host, Charlie Crowley, and tonight, like we do every week, we talk about our community and we talk about the exciting ways in which we could better understand and better appreciate our community, and that's what our goal is here. This show, Olde Tyme Taunton, has been on every week since, let me see, July of 1998. So we're beginning our 16th season here. Tonight we are live, and the topic that we're going to do tonight is downtown Taunton in the 60s and 70s. So if you want to join us, you can call up here, 774-501-1756. That's the phone number here where you can join us. Perhaps you have a question or comment on some of the things that we'll discuss tonight, and a lot of pictures of places that I'm sure you're familiar with that were really at the heart of the activity in downtown. But as the one rule we have here is no politics. You want to talk about politics, talk about call up some other show on this channel, but we try to stay away from it as much as we can. However, we will have some pictures of politicians from time to time, but we're not talking about the so much Democrat-Republican issues type of thing, but what the decisions they made, things like that, as we discuss, especially tonight, Taunton in the 60s and 70s. So tonight, just to give you an idea, the seeds of what the changes that occurred in the 60s and 70s really began in the 1950s. And what downtown looked like at that beginning of the 60s, it looked like the next picture we're going to show you. That's downtown Taunton. It shows you that they didn't have the competition with as much. They did 44 was in existence in Rainham, but you didn't have the competition like you have down where Home Depot, or you didn't have the Silver City Galleria, and this is before the Taunton Mall, the original Taunton Mall was built. But as you can see, very, very busy place. W.T. Grant's was there, and parking was issues and so forth. So they did have some planning committees that began after a study that actually came out in 1963, but actually the seeds of that, as you can see here, were 1954, based on the program, a urban planning assistance program that enabled the Taunton Planning Board to conduct a very, very thorough study. And then when they actually came out, it always happens. A lot of the work's done behind the scenes, but when the actual report comes out, the people who were in office at the time get the credit. So not to say that it was all exclusively Bernard Clary's plan, but you see Ben Friedman was who would later be mayor, was the president of the council, and you get the planning board there with some familiar faces on that. But what came out as part of that particular document was a so-called master plan, and it really wasn't the case, but nonetheless, that's what they called it. And this is the rough drawing they made at the time, and there were actual discussions about closing off Main Street. And you see that green line going down the middle of the street there. That was, they wanted to just close that off and put parking all around it. So that area from City Hall Square to Taunton Green would have been closed somewhat like they did in Providence. And of course, 138 would just come straight up. And you can see the green over there to the left. But that was pretty much a discussion. And they would have ring roads around the city. But that was a plan that was never realized. And one of the big beneficiaries of the traffic that came through the city was the Taunton End. This was, now you might look at it and say that looks like Marion Manor. And that is Marion Manor, but it was the Taunton End at the corner of Summer Street and Spring Street. It was a hotel that replaced the original Taunton End. It was there much longer, a century earlier. But the building that you see there on the left is now a skilled nursing facility. But the hotel, James Cagney stayed here. Over to the right is the herring run room that was in the basement. And of course, the menu that you see there, especially timely with the Christmas dinner that was offered there. This closed in 1962, but the AMVETS Highway, otherwise known as Route 24, came in the 50s, and now people would bypass the city. So it had a significant change, the construction of that roadway on downtown Taunton. But that's the ashtray for the gateway to Cape Cod, because all traffic converged on Taunton. 138, Route 44, and Route 140 all converged on Taunton Green, and that's before the Route 24 was put in, so you had to come through the city if you're going to Boston or Fall River and so forth. But that's the Herring Run restaurant that was in the basement of what we know now as the skilled nursing facility, Marion Manor, when it was the Taunton Inn. And of course they had assembly rooms over there for many meetings. The businesses would conduct their annual meetings here. Of course, there's a bar room there adjacent to the restaurant. But once Route 24, it was under construction in the 50s, and it actually started, the first section was from Ossonnet to Route 44 in Rainham, and eventually went all the way to Boston to what we call the Fork in the area, and went all the way down to Fall River. But one of the challenges that the city leaders faced in the 50s and at the dawn of the 1960s was find parking, public parking. So this area was targeted for municipal parking purposes, and this is the area off of Leonard Street, the fire station you see on the left, and that is where the current parking deck is. And in the 50s, they leveled all these buildings and just put a surface parking lot there. But it wasn't until the 1980s that the current parking deck was put in. And that's what happened when they cleared that all out. You can see the lower right is the Central Fire Station. The building at the top is the Jones Block, the rear of that. The building over to the left would be probably at the time the Big Z, was a popular department store. And it was just no level parking, just a surface parking there. Perhaps you remember going there in one of the big parking lots in town, and when you perhaps enjoyed some of the various businesses downtown. Just give us a call, 774-501-1756. We're going to be talking about the events that took place in the 60s and 70s, the stores that frequented in downtown Taunton, as well as some of the movers and shakers in the community at the time that helped shape the developments of that era in Taunton. So if we're live here tonight. My name is Charlie Crowley. This is all volunteer. We hope you enjoy us. If we have a Facebook page now dedicated to Olde Tyme Taunton, where I put up not only the photographs that people can comment on, historic photographs, but also videos of some of these past Olde Tyme Taunton episodes if you want to watch. If you know family that live out of town and don't get us live, they can just tune into the website and watch one of our programs. And slow but surely, I'll be putting up more and more programs as the time goes on. But what they did is they took out, city leaders at the time took out the old Eagles Club to create a parking area over on Cedar Street. So they had two major municipal parking areas that were created, and there were others created around downtown Taunton. But that's what Taunton looked like in 1966. You had W.T. Grant's store over to the right where the clock is, where many people remember Swartz Office Supply being. You got the gift boutique over at the left where the beauty salon is today at the corner of School Street. You had the, let me see, the Taunton, Pierce Taunton Hardware Store was in existence, Tom Thumb, Puritans, Edicon Johnson's store, and quite a few other things. But the 1960s was really highlighted by the centennial, which would mean the 100th anniversary of Taunton as a city. And there is Mayor Friedman at the time, 1964, June, with Rex Williams, the mayor of Taunton, England, exchanging proclamations. there, and that was a big, big event, a huge parade and activities that went on all year long. And this is a view from a person in the parade as you're coming down Broadway. The Park Theater that you see over to the right, obviously right next to it would be the Strand Theater, but you had Gus's Grill and Landry's Bike Shop, Hanson's Drugstore. This is coming down Broadway. We'd be right in front of the Taunton Trial Court. Now, for any of you that are newcomers to the city, and that was during the Centennial Parade. But just you can see some of the businesses, the China Clipper restaurant. This is the Jones Block where the Bristol County Savings Bank's offices are today. But then if the people would get up on top of the buildings, and you can see how they're lined all along that stretch of the road. They wanted to get a good vantage point of the Taunton Centennial Parade in 1964. This is where Brennan's Smoke Shop would be today, along with Pacheco's Jewelry would be in this location at Off-Broadway Cafe. But that's when it was Orsey's, fruit stand was here, the Duran's was here, and everybody's piled on top of the buildings. Perhaps you watched the Centennial Parade, or and you grew up in the 1960s and 70s in Taunton, and you want to talk about that tonight. Questions or comments? 774-501-1756. That's all it takes to join us. We're live here tonight. Perhaps you went to the old Cotillion on Broadway. And this would be right where Joe's Diner is today. And that was the Hotwick building that originally was a bowling alley, and then it later became CETA, the CETA offices on in this particular building, and it burned down in March of 1978. But that's in 1964. It was quite a popular spot, discotheque, somewhat at that time. There's Rex William and his wife, the mayor of Taunton, England, and his wife in the Centennial Parade. Some of the people here over to the right, Police Chief John Babola. You have a number of the local citizenry. And these were the wooden nickels that were issued in 1964. But it was intended to honor the anniversary. It was one of the trinkets. They're still around, but I have a few of them that I've saved. This is the bow tie that was worn by many of the leaders, movers and shakers of that period as part of the Centennial. They had the Brothers of the Brush, which many of the local leaders grew a beard, and they called themselves the Brothers of the Brush. Perhaps you were one of them, and you want to let us know about it. But as you can see, the old Pierce Taunton hardware store was up on top. Many of these stores, very, very popular. As we go on, we have a call. You're next. Whoops, we had a call. Try again here, 774-501-1756. When you do call, just make sure you dial *82 if you have a private line. That way you'll be able to get through, because I have a little gadget here that has your number on it. I'll erase it afterwards, but only if your number appears here will we pick it up. Well, as we're talking about the 60s and 70s, here's Pierce Hardware that you saw the sign. But that's the store that was right where the Antique Center is today. And it had several floors. It also would actually come out onto Ware Street. But if you want to know what it looked like inside, that is now, this is when it was Pierce Hardware. And it was, now of course people go to Home Depot or the Whittington Hardware. But you could go right downtown, and that's what it looked like inside the Pierce Hardware store in downtown Taunton. Perhaps you remember that. Maybe this caller does. You're next. Whoops, we had a call again. Oh, somebody got to give us another try. 774-501-1756. We're talking about downtown. Here's another view of Pierce Hardware in downtown Taunton. They sold everything in this store. But then a typical view of the area. Whoops. You're next in Old Tyme Taunton.
Good evening, Charlie. How are you?
Good, good.
Good to hear you, Charlie.
Yes. What do you remember about the 60s and 70s?
Well, Charlie, I was going to ask you, do you still have the old taping of Bob Hope?
I have the many views of Bob Hope when he appeared in 19, let me see, it would be 85, June of 85.
Oh, that's in 85.
Yeah, it was the, he came as part of the 300th anniversary of Bristol County. It was on the courthouse line. Sheena Martinez was the MC of that particular event.
Yes, I remember that. I went to that. Yes.
Yeah, but that was the 80s.
Yeah.
That was the 80s. So this is the 2 decades before that we're focusing on tonight.
Right. But Charlie, I also want to thank you for having these types of shows to, to show people what the yesteryears of Taunton were like. Mm-hmm. And I think that's quite great of you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Charlie.
Hey, take care now. We appreciate that. That's what we do. It's all volunteer. And many, many years ago, I started collecting and doing things and trying to promote Taunton history, and I just love doing it. I believe the more you know about Taunton, the more you love it. We have a unique community, a very, very precious future, but a very glorious past. And what we try to do is show what it's like, learn from how we evolved up to this point. And that's what the purpose of the show is. Like, for example, in the 1960s and 70s, you had Applegates. This was at the corner of School Street and Main Street, and this was actually taken in 1972, by the way. But that's right where the beauty parlor is today, the training center there. And you see Woolworths over to the right. One of the popular stores in downtown Taunton was Swartz Office Supply, where the clock, the TMLP clock, that was originally called the Colby clock. But Ronnie Swartz ran this business for many, many years in the building that used to house W.T. Grant's. Grant's moved up to the plaza where Shaw's had been recently up on Winthrop Street and Warner Boulevard. Later, Caldo's moved into it, but that's where W.T. Grant's moved from here up there, which made way for Swartz Office Supply. This is Tom Thumb in Puritan's store, right at the corner of the alleyway, right on Main Street. Very, very popular store. It was there for many, many years, sometimes in different locations, but it was downtown all along. Of course, in 1913 opened Goodnow's. Didn't look quite like this. This was taken in the late 70s, but you had Foreman's. One thing about Goodnow's is that people would go inside and they had the pneumatic tubes in there, and Tom Lahar, who owned this in the 1990s, owned Goodnow's, he gave me this section of the pipe, and with a little canister that you see there, and you could go in, you'd be begging your parents to buy a pair of socks, anything, just so they could put the money in the receipt in that, the cashier would, and it would bing bang and go through the pipes all the way to the back and drop in the basket and the treasure in the back, and they'd make the change for you and then send it right back to the cashier at the checkout counter. So it was quite a popular spot. Another place downtown was Dunnington's Drugstore at the corner of Ware Street and Taunton Green, the Cohanet block as it's called. The building that's painted white to the side was the actual Seeley building. They had 2 different buildings, and they all burned at the same time back around 2004, I believe. Gabrielle's restaurant was here, Mug a Muffin, over the years. But at this particular time was Dunnington's Drugstore, and Talbot Seeley's would be in the to the right, or the Seeley store. On Ware Street, this is right where Fenton's Motors was located, and it's right next to what we know now as Pub 76. And then in the 70s, it was the Registry over to the right. But that's when it was Fenton Motors, and how it evolved from the 50s up through the 80s. This is the building that in the 70s, the building in the center there with the blue writing, that is now Pub 76, but that's when this picture was taken when it was the Registry of Motor Vehicles. The building to the right is Bristol County Electric, and you can see the tower in the back. That was originally the Armory, and it was the Armory, or used as an armory before the armory that we know on Pleasant Street was constructed. How about Foster's Clothing Store? Anyone remember that? 774-501-1756. Taunton in the 60s and 70s. This was originally a hotel. All three, Foster's, Dean Brothers, this building called Dunbar Block was sometimes referred to as the Park Hotel building. But it was actually three hotels, separate hotels at one time. And of course, the Bristol County National Bank to the right, the Mellow Building as we know it today. If you looked in 1966 up Winthrop Street, you had Bernier's Cafe, the Orient Restaurant, and you had the steeple on the Winthrop Street Baptist Church. The first service in that church was a memorial service for Abraham Lincoln. But you see the Flying A gas stations, you had all kinds of different gas stations back then, Gulf and Flying A and Sunoco and City Service, Tri-S, all kind of different ones back then. Also on Winthrop Street, you had Plank and Hanson's. This is where Barron Brothers was in recent years that burned down. But Plank and Hanson's was at one time located right across from City Hall at the corner of Union Street. Then they moved into this particular building. So this was taken when it was Plank and Hanson's. Perhaps you remember getting furniture in there. Dr. Watson is the one who actually took these pictures of downtown Taunton in 1966. We had H.L. Green's over there on the right at the corner of School Street. It was very, very popular store. You had the Schulte's cigar store and at the far back, just to the right of the courthouse. We'll take a look at that a little bit. But the 57 Chevy and I believe it's a 59 Ford that's in the foreground here. Some of the beautiful cars back at that time. But you can see in the background what's called the Taunton Green Building with the Circle Cafe, and the beauty supply store and Schulte's cigar store. The Taunton Green Cafe was the Circle Cafe, and then Central Radio was there, Kirby's Shoes, among the popular stores in this area. If you look up Broadway, on the left you had the side of the Taunton Green Building. They had a store on the right, immediately on the right, called the Music Box, where you could get, say, the Elvis Presley or Beatles records there, and the LPs, as they call them, or the 45s. And then, of course, Central Radio, Benny's was located. The third store up on the left was Benny's before they moved over to Route 44 at the Taunton-Rainham line. On the other side, you'd have the Swedish coffee shop, the China Clipper, the Landry's. In later years, in the 70s, you had Ace Nichols Barroom was here. Mulhern's would be on the corner. This is Benny's. This is before they moved down to their popular spot down here on Route 44 across from, at that time, it would have been right across from where Howdy Beef Burger used to be. Duran's, this is where the off-Broadway cafe is today. A very, very popular ice cream place. A lot of the dates, people from the various high schools would go here, be it Coyle or Taunton High or St. Mary's High School. They would end up going down here. A lot of people hang out in front in front of the store because you cruise. When you go cruising around that time, you'd cruise from the root beer stand, you come by down Broadway, and go around Taunton Green and go all the way down to, say, Roman's or Pal's Pizza down in Rainham, where McDonald's is today in that area. If you want to go to movies, you bring your date, you go get some ice cream or go to a movie. And this is right where the Taunton Trial Court is today, right opposite Leonard Street. This was the larger of the two major theaters that we had during that time, and this was the Park Theater that really was in its last days at the beginning of the 1960s, and then have a gate across it. But the Strand Theater operated through most of the 60s, which would be right to the right of this. Here's the Strand Theater. This picture was taken in 1964, so at that time you could see the bridge over the River Kwai. Perhaps you have a favorite movie that you saw at the park or the Strand Theater. 774-501-1756. We're live here tonight if you want to call up and talk about some of the favorite stores, the people, the activities, the events that took place in the 60s and 70s. Everything's fair game here tonight. You get something that you're curious about, you want to know about, just give me a call. I'll try to give you an answer if I can. If I don't, perhaps in an additional week I'll be able to get back to you with the correct answer. If you want to go up to into the Strand Theater and go for a snack, that's what the candy counter looked like at the snack bar there at the Strand Theater. And on that spot, they took down the two theaters in the 70s and put up, in the early 70s, what was originally Carol's Hamburgers. And then afterwards it became the Hurry-In Restaurant, which you see, this picture is boarded up at the time. And then after that would be Store 24. That's right where the Taunton Trial Court is today. But for me, that's when it was the Hurry-In Restaurant, the picture that you see there. I do not have a picture of it when it was Carol's. So if any of you know anybody that has a picture of Carol's Hamburger Stand when it was in Taunton, I would love to get a copy of that. If so, keep that in mind. Of course, the Cantillion that we saw earlier with a little VW bug out in front. And of course, WPEP on Broadway. I heard that was Bob Camerata that was in the car here. But they were for many years at the Roseland, and then they moved here. The McGregor Law Office was here, right next to the Pilgrim Church. And they were here before they moved to the corner of Broadway in that small Liberty Lane, as they call it, overlooking Taunton Green. Perhaps you remember going to the Big Z. This picture was taken the day of the Centennial Parade, but that's where the Sovereign Bank or the Santander Bank is today, with Big Z, Robel's, Enterprise Store, the Bargain Warehouse was here, Brindle's Deli over the years, and of course the Taunton Savings Bank and the Sovereign Bank in recent years. But if you have a question or comment, just give us a call. Perhaps you want to go for a snack in Spick and Span Bakery, where Rune's Cafe was in recent years. A very popular coffee shop. In town, you had the Gob Shop right next to it. Army Navy stores and downtown, and McManus's ice cream shop, and where D'Angelo's was in recent years, where DeVito's Pizza is, and then of course H.L. Green's. There's the H.L. Green. You can see the picture for the Gob Shop. And in the 70s, the H.L. Green building was torn down, and they put up this the Durfee Trust Bank. Probably the ugliest building. A lot of times, and I say that that's just my personal opinion, because a lot of times when architects build it or design a building, they fail to look at what's around it. And in this particular case, with the brownstone buildings to the left of it, it just didn't fit in my opinion. But others can disagree. This is the Woolworths, the 5 and 10, as some people called it, where the homes for the troops are today. And F.W. Woolworths actually began over where the Sovereign Bank is, and then they moved here on, in the late 30s, I believe, is when they moved to this location. There was a Chinese restaurant on the second floor for a period of time. But in here is where you'd go, and you could also get a banana split or any kind of ice cream or a sandwich at the counter inside here. Pober's, over there to the left where the Tuxtown is today. Jose's popular store, Tuxtown, is in that building now. But Pober's was so popular with the women in town because that's where the latest fashions were offered, that I've actually talked to people and they still have their credit card. I took their name off of it here, but just to show you, they still had their credit card in their wallet. That's how popular this particular store was. Mel's Jewelers. London's is more, it was here in Taunton at one time, but actually London's is probably more famous for it having been in Attleboro. Kennedy's, Central Radio, St. Pierre's Shoe Store, which is still there in Taunton, and Dana's furniture store over there to the left on Main Street. There it is. Dana's had later become DeMello's furniture store, right opposite Cedar Street in Taunton. Perhaps you remember that. It had the green background with the silver letters. And that's what the sign looked like originally. They got the bigger sign. Just the same thing happened with, that's New York Lace, the facade for New York Lace, and then they put in a more modern storefront here. Many of the bridal gowns, people would come into here. It was a very, very popular store. It's been there for many, many years. Now you're looking up Main Street here. You can see the Machinist National Bank on the right. That's right at the corner of Cedar Street. And that's what it looked like inside. Nowadays, when you go in the banks, they have more protective glass and safety glass and all kinds of things like that. But at this time, they didn't have all that, as you can see. That's as you walk in the door, it would be to the left. That's Goldstein's and Antine's. That's the Leonard Block building, which will be taken down very shortly. It's now, that whole building is owned by the city of Taunton. The little store to the right, it was a little coffee shop, it was Ben's. And then you have, to the left is where, at one time, the building to the left, or the storefront to the left, would be where B.F. Stanton's was located. And this was the fire in 1964, right across from City Hall. You can see on the left the finest supermarket, and that is where the Taunton Police Station is. It's the very same building. It would later become Aetna Insurance Company. It's right next to City Hall. But right across from City Hall where that park is, DeWitt Park, or Liberty and Union Park as it's sometimes called, that is the result, created as a result of this fire in 1964. The Taunton Hardware store fire, and they would later merge with Pierce Hardware. So it would become Pierce Taunton Hardware Store. Now we get to City Hall, and we get to look at the people, the movers and shakers who worked out of this particular area. At the beginning of the 60s, you had Mayor Bernard Cleary. When he was a very, very formidable speaker, a formidable presence, if you will. He would really gain notoriety because he was censoring movies. He didn't bother to hire a separate censor. He took on that role. So he would, a lot of times, create controversy when somebody, oh my God, their skirt was above their knee. And he would create quite a stir back then. Of course, during his tenure in 1960 is when the Warner Boulevard was created to create industrial opportunities between Dighton and Westville, a section of Taunton. And Bernard Cleary there, he actually came to office and served 2 terms, but he actually died just before his term ended, and Ben Friedman took his place. But that's Warner Boulevard, as you can see, going from the area. It would be Caldor's at the time when this picture was taken, but that's where Shaw's was, that went to the left, that plaza, and with Job Outlet. Over to the right was Almack's. Later would be the cinemas, and then it would be Grossman's, and then now the dollar store is in there. Ben Friedman became the mayor following Bernard Cleary. And he was actually the council president, a local attorney. He took office, served 3 terms during the 1960s and another term in the 1970s. But that's a picture of his testimonial booklet, if you will, with all the little cartoons that were created. You're next on Old Time Taunton.
Hey, Charles, how's it going?
Good, good.
Hey, just want to let you know you did a great job this year with the lighting of the green.
Oh, thank you.
And the parade. You just, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Me and my girlfriend, Amanda Cabral, we watch you every Wednesday night. She's a big fan of you.
Great. Great. Well, thank you.
I just want to give a little shout out there to her. She's probably watching it right now.
Good. Well, thank you.
All right.
Take up. Thank you very much. Want to give a shout out to someone that person just did. 774-501-1756. We're live here December 18th, 2013. We're talking about the 60s and 70s, and some of the things that took place in the 60s was one of the earlier dam crises in Taunton, and this was the Maury's Bridge. The rains that we had in March of 1968, they had to put a lot of sandbags on the bridge to keep it from bursting, so downtown was in jeopardy of being flooded. But the picture to the top left shows you that the building, the actual gatehouse, that had been repaired many times over the years. It was just old. And it was taken down in recent years. But there were many crises. Of course, 2005 was probably the biggest, most noteworthy one, made Bob Nunes famous for the way he expertly handled that situation. The Vietnam Fountain was built in 1968. October 20th is when it was dedicated. The fountain came about from a lot of volunteers, donations, but it was really spearheaded by Ben Friedman and Senator John Parker, because they would go to Providence to the train station in order to join the families as the soldiers who lost their life fighting for freedom in Vietnam. And as a result of that, it was not a popular war, as many of you know. However, it did not stop the leaders in Taunton from putting up a memorial to those who sacrificed their lives for their country. And there's 13 people whose names are dedicated on that tablet. But there's Senator John Parker, and of course his wife May Parker, always with him. But Mayor Parker was really one of the most respected politicians the city has ever known. You had your share of protesters of the Vietnam War. This would be in the early 70s, and it's right on Taunton Green. In the background is the old Taunton Green building. Broadway would be to the far right in the rear, holding up signs. Frank Rico was a local state representative, and he at the close of his term, before he died, he ended up spearheading what would later become Massachusetts State Park. He actually saw it realized in the late 1960s. Ted Alexo became a state representative around 1968 on stickers because he failed to get enough signatures to be on the ballot. So he ran on stickers and won. And he was in his 20s when he won that. And he would later become mayor of the city of Taunton for one term. And of course, later on, state senator. After Ben Friedman was mayor and he retired, Mayor Joe Flood took over. He was a longtime city assessor. And during his tenure, the generating station on Somerset Ave, the TMLP generating station, was realized, part of which was spearheaded by Mayor Clary and part by Joe Flood, so it was called the Clary-Flood generating station. Following Joe Flood was Mayor Rudolph De Silva, and he was a war hero who served in both the World War II and in Korea and in Vietnam, and he was a prisoner of war during Korea at the Battle of Frozen Chosin and was later released. He stayed in the military and he became mayor of the city from 1972 to 1973. Also in office, State Representative Charles Flannery in the 1970s, very, very popular gentleman. We had several state representatives at that time. Ted Alexo in the mid-70s, 1974, 75, you had, let me see, you had in here Andrew Dooley, you had, I believe Jimmy Gallego was, Bob Studley in this picture, Walter Precourt, trying to think of some of the others here, Chet Martin's in the picture, oh, quite a few people, Bucky Grant were among the people in that picture. Mayor Friedman came back in 1976 to 77, and he was the mayor for what would be his 4th term. But you got Honey Calvi in the picture. You have you know, Bucky Grant, a lot of different, the same people were in office quite a while. Yeah, Leddy, Councilman Leddy is in the picture. Let me see, during his term, he actually ran against Ted Alexo, and both formidable politicians. But one of the biggest issues was the water. The water had, you had to boil the water during that period of time. And so Ben Freeman would go to a lot of the senior citizens and bringing them clear drinking water, and it led to his very aggressive campaign, and he unseated the current mayor at the time, which was Ted Alexo. But he served for just 1 term, and then, of course, Joe Amaral succeeded him. But during Ben Freeman's term, he was very, very strong advocate of building schools, a very strong supporter of education. Of course, he during his tenure, they had the both the Pole School and the Bennett School built in the 60s. But then later during his term, there were other administrations that planted the seed for this. But during his term is when the St. Joseph School was acquired and later changed to Galligan School. And of course, the Sacred Heart School changed to Edward Leddy School. Joe Amaral took over from 78 up to 81. And of course, he was only in office about a month when the blizzard of 78. This photograph was taken by the very popular and talented photographer, Pete Mazzone, one of the few people that actually got out to take pictures that ultimately for the newspaper. Everything got, as you well know, during that period of time, a lot of things stopped. But Pete Mazzone was able to get a number of good pictures, famous pictures here, looking up Winthrop Street in the blizzard of 78. Couldn't get a taxi cab during that time. The roads were closed off for several days. When they say the mail must go through, well, it didn't go through during the blizzard of 78. It's the old Gazette building to the left, in the back of the Crocker building in the far background there. But this picture is Madison Street. The top left is Madison Street in the blizzard of 78. Lower right was my street, Worcester Street, in that period of time. It shows you the type of equipment that had to come out to plow that snow at that time. Ray Buffetti, he was a state representative during the 1970s. Very popular state representative, later would return to city government and become a very popular city councilman. Lived, I believe, down on Johnson Street area. Well-respected gentleman. Diners, Sully Diner in the 1964, that was the last year for this particular diner. That's when Hickey's Diner moved to the corner of the green. There is, and that's Jack Hickey there on the lower left. That's pictures Hickey's Diner when at its day location on Court Street near the Boys Club. And then they would only be allowed to move there till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, from 4 o'clock to about midnight, 1 o'clock, and then they'd go back to their daytime location. Cohannet Street, Hewitt's Cafe, Davis Lunch, Riley's would be up on the left. This would be the eye care, eyewear place there, right across from Drummond's, and right across from Hazelton, the old Hazelton End. The YMCA in late 1960s, 70s, this is probably 1970, 71. That's a Ford Maverick, that gold car in the foreground. But that's the old YMCA that was torn down, and the back part where the pool was remained, and they put on the addition. Across the street was the Hazelton Hotel. It burned down, but that was a very prominent landmark at one time. Perhaps you remember that. This is the old High Street. That's when this was discontinued during the urban renewal phase of Taunton. You're next in Old Time Taunton.
Hey, Charles.
Hi, how are you?
Just wondering if you have any old pictures of the Henry Soup stand?
I do have, well, I don't have real old ones yet. I got a few that are probably taken in maybe the 70s. I don't have any real old ones.
My father Johnny used to always tell me stories about how he'd go there back in the day and the girls on the roller skates.
Sure. Oh yeah, very popular because a lot of people would do the, when they had their 57 Chevy or something, would go from the root beer stand all the way down through the city by Duran's and go down to Pal's Pizza over near Burke's in Rainham. Very popular cruising.
That must have been a cool thing back then. It's sad that, that landmark had to come down,
Yeah, but now I still refer it when people are asking for directions. It's up by the root beer stand, and I gotta remember to start using Dunkin' Donuts now. But,
it's true because people all around say, oh yeah, Henry's root beer stand. I'm like, oh, it's gone now,
Yeah, it's tough, but it was there for so long and brought memories to a lot of people.
Oh yeah, it's just everybody had good childhood memories there.
Sure. Well, thanks.
How about you guys have many pictures of the midget gas station there?
I do. I don't know if I have them in this program, but I do. I may. I'll have to go through a few more pictures here, but I do have it. Pictures when we do the one on Whittington. That's when I usually show it. But I don't know if I remember if I included it in this program. But we got quite a few pictures left because now I start to go out to the surrounding neighborhoods, and I believe I might have that showed tonight. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. As we go the High Street, the urban renewal, some of the popular landmarks like this, the old corner fruit store that no longer exists, right near the main entrance of the current YMCA, right diagonally across from the Cohannet School. Of course, you had the old CYO, where the Bank of America is today. That burned down around 1972. All the dances that were held there in basketball games. You had the old Taunton Daily Gazette building, right where this Gazette building is today on Cohannet Street. Morton Laundry would be over to the right, as you can see. Of course, if you want to go for lumber, instead of going to Home Depot, they didn't have it then. You had Grossman's or Grossman's. Right on Oak Street, right where the railroad tracks, where Bloom's bus station is today. And this is the whole area where in between Franklin Street, Cohannet Street, and Washington Street, all of that was taken down. As you can see, the freight depot over there to the right, that's the old High Street area, all taken down. So structures like this, the old right where the Webster Bank is, at the corner of Tremont Street and Washington and Oak Street. That was the old freight depot. That's taken down, but that was taken down around 1974. The old Central Railroad Depot, where the Taunton Mall is, was later built. This was taken down in 1964. That's what it looked like around 1960, though, that particular photograph. And that's another view of it looking back towards the freight depot. All this is where the Taunton Mall was installed, where the Registry of Motor Vehicles is today. This is the old High Street area, looking from where the Cohannet School was. Up this section of Cohannet Street, or High Street, excuse me, was discontinued. They took this right out. That's what it looked like. All that was replaced, as you can see, torn down. The YMCA was still there. They took down the Cape Verdean Cafe that you see to the left, the old St. Cloud Hotel to the right. That's what it was, say, 100 years ago. But all these buildings, as part of urban renewal, were torn down. Even these mill houses that were right near the end of High Street, almost near the Cohannet School. And this is across from Leahy's Liquor, where the Dunkin' Donuts is today. They just torn down the Hillside Cafe when this picture was taken. And that's Leahy's Liquor's looking down where the Mill River Apartments would be, Mill Pond Apartments. All that's the old McAndrade Hotel in the background. Right where on the grassy knoll there where the pharmacy is, and near where Dunkin' Donuts, that's when it was Rocky's Barber Shop. And that's Rocky, the elder Rocky, well, the younger Rocky, Ernie, to the left in the background. And then his father, the original Rocky, is there. And John Furtado is in there as well. The corner of Tremont Street and Washington Street, the old gas station that was there. Empire Paint burned down in that area, but that burned down in I believe it's 65, I believe that was. This is looking up Washington Street from Court Street. Now you'd have Dunkin' Donuts and Leahy's Liquor up there, but that's what it looked like in the 1960s. Big Bear, you still had the freight depot at the top of the hill. Now that they put in the 1970s the Taunton Mall, so you had Rite Aid, Canterbury Shoes, the Taunton Savings Bank, Lorenzo's, Radio Shack, all kinds of stores in there, popular stores, Bradley's, Stop and Shop. The VFW was taken down. This was the jail where Lizzie Borden was detained a century ago, but this was the VFW in the 60s, and it was torn down, and they built the facility there on Ingle Street. This is Mohegan's gas station right at the corner of Granite Street and Tremont Street, not too far from Meineke Muffler. The old railroad towers, the switching towers that were there on Tremont Street. You take for granted sometimes how many times you drive by that. On Court Street, the old police station with the paddy wagon, and J.M. Wells was the old Oddfellows Hall. That's where the State Theater was located. There's Police Chief John Bobola. There he is. And in 1968 is when then Mayor Ben Friedman signed the very first patrolman's contract. So it was very surrounded by them, the very first negotiated between the city. So took a lot of power away from the police chief at the time. There's some of Taunton's finest. During that time, maybe you recognize a few of the people. George Costa, one person. The Taunton Junior Police Band. Monsignor Canty is over to the right. Fred Martin is in there. Oh, geez, Tony. Oh, George Triano. John Gonzalez is in the back. Bull Martin's in the back as well. Some of the junior, Senator Pacheco is in here somewhere. I don't know which one. It's kind of tough to see anyway. That's the old armory where a lot of the graduations were held for the elementary schools, the grammar schools, I should say. This is the 1962 Christmas display, 1963. If you grew up during that period of time, 1964, designed by John Baradas. These are what the Christmas displays look like during that period in the 60s and 70s. Of course, if you want to go to a supermarket, go to A&P, maybe the Highway Supermarket, where Read More Books and Jack Letty's DeVal printing outfit is there. Or you can go to Truckey's on Tremont Street, where Grundy's used to be. You go to a photomat and get your pictures. Now they have digital pictures, but back then you had to have them developed, and they had photomats back then. If you want to go for ice cream, you could go to Sankey's Milk Bottle, right where Frank's Good Time Lounge is and the Taunton Rental Center on Winthrop Street. Go to Lewis Lodge up on Winthrop Street, where the used to be Frank's. It was an outdoor gardening center at one time. Grundy's is on Tremont, right where Truckey's was. Howdy Beef Burger, right across from Benny's. I'm rushing through them because we're just running out of time, so I want to make sure I get them all in here. Romans, Route 44 in Rainham. That would be right where McDonald's is, on Route 44 in Rainham. Very popular spot. And that's where Bonnie Brook restaurant would be. That's where Globe Liquors, just where 104 comes out onto 44. Right, it's in Taunton, but it backs up to the Taunton River. And Saul Burke was actually located next to Grossman's on Oak Street, and then he moved down and built a very, very popular shopping center on Route 44 across from Pal's Pizza. Boston Market had been located here in recent years. Mammoth Mart. That's where Marshall's and Shaw's Supermarket is today. Up there's the root beer stand. An earlier caller talked about that. One of the top's probably the earliest picture I have of the root beer stand. And then it was Henry's Root Beer, of course, in recent years, and then it was called The Stand. Now it's Dunkin' Donuts. The Moonbeam Lounge up on Route 140 in Oakland, in Wooded Spring area. That was, later it would be the Lunacy, the Gathering, and the Rocking Horse Saloon would be here. But in the 60s and the early 70s, it was the Moonbeam Lounge. Marty and Jan Schultz operated that. That's the Ward 8 Club that later became Benjamin's Restaurant. The Gondola Restaurant, run by the Riva family, where the home plate is, up on Bay Street overlooking the Sabbatia. Land's End Restaurant, right across from Paul Deva, right where the Land's End condominiums is located. That burned down in the mid-1960s, 65, 66, I believe. Of course, you can go to a drive-in theater then too. That's up where the Market Basket is in Rainham on 138. And then, or you could go in the 70s, you could go to the Chalet Cinema, where the John Deere place is now on 138, right next to Market Basket. Or you could go to the Grand Theater in the early 1960s. This was in Whittington on Bay Street across from the Immaculate Conception Church. Or you go to the Dog Track. That's where the auto auction is on Route 44 in Westville. It opened in 1935, and in 1981 is when it closed, but many of the graduate school graduations were held here. Matter of fact, my graduation from Taunton High School was held at this, the Taunton Dog Track. That's what it looked like, and traffic would be backed up for miles. Route 44, North Walker Street, oh, it was tremendous. Some of the schools that, that closed or were built, the two County Street School and the Fuller School were closed. Fuller School was on School Street. And the original Elizabeth Pole School was built around 1966, 67. The Mulcahy School and the Walker School, the overcrowded conditions at Mulcahy School led to the students being shipped down to the Walker School. And then while the construction of the Edmund Hatch Bennett School was being done. 1972 saw the Joseph Martin School built. That's Morton Hospital, the original entrance to Morton Hospital. Around 1966, I believe, 67 is when this was taken down, but that's what it looked like. And this became the main entrance to Morton Hospital during that period. The old ambulance entrance opposite the old Taunton High School. This picture was taken in the 40s, but that's what Taunton High looked like at the time. The old Taunton High, right where the Thayer Medical Center is in Morton Hospital. And that's the booklets that they had back then, the Taunton High Coil games. Hopewell Park, 1968. Bayless Estate, where they put up the new high school. Groundbreaking for the what would be the Bishop Cassidy School. The Industrial Park came about during basically the late 70s. And of course, the Paul Deva School was famous during that time. But every Wednesday night, we do Old Time Taunton here. Many of the shows will now be on my Facebook page. You'll be able to get tapes of these. We do repeat this program every Saturday night and Sunday morning, 8 o'clock. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a wonderful, happy holidays, both Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll be doing the repeat programs the next 2 weeks because they fall on the holiday. And a new live program will begin in 2014. So thank you and good night.